And I just want to welcome all of our virtual participants here. It looks like we still have some folks joining, which is great. We want to be timely on our program today, and thank you for joining on this 9 o'clock Tuesday morning. I was going to call it a Monday morning, but it's Tuesday. The NODE, Northeast Ohio Development Exchange. And my name is Renee Lagon. I am the Director of Partnerships and Engagement with Team NEO. And Team NEO, our mission, as you know, is to accelerate the pace of equity and outcomes where we strive to create jobs and drive new capital investments into our region through our business retention and expansion efforts. And in so doing, we can become the region that will demand talent. And today, we're going to talk about all the wonderful ways that we can be more coordinated together and grab this great panel of intellectual capital with our dear Bethany Dentler, who is going to be our moderator for our program today. And I just like to tell you a little bit about Bethany. Bethany, I have come to know over time through many board services and work that I've done in my prior life. And Bethany is a very dear place for me. She is a phenomenal woman with a tremendous amount of experience and a heart for people and her community. And, you know, that's the informal, heartfelt introduction that I have for Bethany. But to bring this to a more formal platform, Bethany has been the executive director for the Medina County Economic Development Corporation since 2008, where she also serves as the administrator of the Medina County Port Authority. She holds the Certified Economic Development designation through the International Economic Development Council, and she also received Team NEO's Economic Development Champion Award in 2018, and an exceptional partner she is. Ms. Dentler has a bachelor's degree in English and economics from Goucher College, and she earned a master's degree in economics from the University of Maryland. We appreciate Bethany taking the time to be our moderator today. Please note that if you have questions, we will have a question and answer session at the end of the program, but please use the question and answer feature that is located on the Q&A button in the menu as we go through the program, and Bethany will help to triage those questions for you. Please continue to keep your phones or your systems on mute. And I am now going to turn this program over to the very capable hands of Bethany Dentler. Thank you, Bethany.
Thank you, Renee, for that very kind introduction, and welcome everyone who is joining us. I've also been on the steering committee for the Northeast Ohio Development Exchange, or NODE, since our very beginning. So on behalf of NODE, thank you so much for joining us today. We're certainly happy to partner with Team NEO to bring you programming that we hope will enhance your business development efforts. As economic developers, we know what a critical role is played by infrastructure in the site selection process. So today we're going to take a deeper dive into the worlds of electricity and natural gas, and we're going to go behind the scenes with a few of our key utility partners. So this morning, we will hear from several utility professionals about how and when to engage with their companies during the project process for optimum results for your clients. We're going to focus first on electricity. Renee from First Energy will not be able to join us today, but we are certainly glad to have with us Liberty Schindel, Senior Economic Development Analyst with American Electric Power, also known as AEP in Ohio. Liberty has been with the company for 3 years and has her MPA from Cleveland State University and is a certified economic developer as well as an EDFP. Liberty was born and raised in Lake County, so we're glad we're keeping it local here. So I will turn the floor over to Liberty now for some insights on how to navigate with her company. Liberty?
Good morning, everyone. It's so great to be home virtually. I saw quite a few participants. Jason Ricker, you are the perfect example of someone who works really, really well with the electric utility company, kind of keeping us in the loop. I saw Miranda from Wayne. It's really great to see other folks just personally from home today. Thank you, Bethany. Really appreciate this. Thank you, Team NEO, for the opportunity and Node to do this today. I'm going to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about electric utility protocols for site selection projects. And while this is focused on AEP, a lot of the same content applies to First Energy. And yesterday, unfortunately, as Bethany had mentioned, that Renee is not able to make it this morning. I spoke with Pat Kelly, and so we kind of went through this a little bit. And so again, a lot of the principles are the same. If you could go to the next slide, please. So AEP in Ohio, for those of you that don't know, we serve nearly 1,000 communities in 61 of the 88 counties. We have just over 1.4 million customers, and of those, nearly 200,000 are commercial and industrial customers. We have 1,400 employees, and that's just AEP Ohio. AEP is in 11 states, and our corporate headquarters is in Columbus. In 2019, we had $13 million in support to our communities. In 2020, we contributed to over $40,000 in site development. We also have basic course and OEDI scholarships, and those are available to folks that are in our service territory. Next slide, please. Next one. Okay, thank you. So, there you go. Thank you. Anything that's economic development related needs to be sent to Economic and Business Development, which is EBD for short. If additional team members need to be engaged, which would be someone like our external affairs folks or customer service representatives, Economic and Business Development will make that determination and get them involved. This allows for complete and consistent information. And an example of this is that AEP Ohio, so our customer service representatives, our customer account managers, our community affairs / external affairs, they're not able to provide market information. You should reach out to Economic Development each and every time you submit for a project, even if you just submitted the site for a different project, or it's an authenticated site or part of another Site Ohio program. Each project is different. They have different requirements, different load characteristics, and our capacity changes. Our system is dynamic. Let us know if you're submitting a project, even if there's no electric information. We keep track of the sites that have been submitted for projects, and we use that to help justify improvements to our infrastructure. Even if you don't know for sure if you're going to submit a site or a number of sites for an RFI, it's better to send it to Economic and Business Development so that our team can begin the evaluation process. Our engineers prefer to have at least 4 to 5 business days to review this because they're handling so many different projects and their territories are very large. We need a minimum of 48 hours, but we, again, prefer to have a longer window of time. If you are looking for us to help determine the cost to serve or extend service to a site or a building, that actually takes longer. That can take 1 to 2 weeks. And that's because our team may need to go out into the field and see what's going on at that site. They also might need to go out to the building and see what infrastructure is there. Next slide, please. So when you're submitting a request to us to have us review a site to see, or a building to see if we can have, the capacity to serve, please make sure you include the site name with the Zoom Prospector link. Please provide a map, especially, in Northeast Ohio, there's some counties that I'm not really familiar with. And so, I don't have that knowledge that Tim used to have. So knowing where it is, especially kind of zooming out a little bit, and you can see where the major roads are, that allows us and our engineering team to kind of orient themselves as to where this is located. knowing what the overall project requirements are. What's the electric information provided? What type of business this is? What are the operating hours? Copy and paste sections that are related to us, so that we can see it right there. If you think about it, for instance, AEP, again, 61 of the 88 counties. And so we're getting lots and lots of requests from all over, and it's multiple RFIs. And so trying to keep it all straight by having that up front is going to be super helpful to us. Knowing when the submission deadlines and when our response is needed is really, really important. Next slide. Thank you. So in an RFI, the questions that pertain to electric generally focus on what's the capacity at that site. What's the available volume of electricity that can be supplied to the customer on a circuit? Keeping in mind that our system is dynamic, so capacity changes. People, businesses are constantly, moving in or moving off, and so our system changes with that. Can the utility provide the necessary level of service to a building or a site? What are the costs, including construction upgrades and electric rates? The delivery voltage, is this going to be transmission, which are kind of like our highways, or is it going to be distribution, which are kind of like our streets? And that's transmission is the larger voltage and distribution is the smaller voltage. And part of that is rates, infrastructure, and cost, and then outage information. Next slide. So in order for us to really evaluate, if we have the capacity at a site, the minimum items that we need is peak demand, energy consumption, hours of operation, delivery voltage, and load factor. I can give the example of a RFI that was sent out a couple months ago that just had 12,000 amps on it. 12,000 amps doesn't tell us anything. We have several formulas where we can plug in assumptions that we can come up to a number that would give us the peak demand, but that's just an assumption. So really and truly, peak demand is probably the most important of the 5 things, but they're all very, very important. When we get deeper into the project or the site selection process, understanding the load characteristics are going to be really important. Is this a business that has, that's like a, going to have like a huge, ramp up, and they're going to be, drawing a lot of electricity. So for instance, you can think of like a smelter or a steel mill. They'll have huge periods where they draw a lot of electricity, and that can cause, some challenges on our system and for other customers. What's the type of equipment that they're going to be using there? Power quality requirements and power factor. And one of the biggest things is where the prospect plans to take service. Where the prospect plans to take service impacts the cost of what it's going to take to get, from wherever the location at the street, where have you, to the building. Next slide. So we receive economic development leads from a variety of sources. We receive them in partnership with all of you, direct contact from companies, so these organic leads. We have a business development or a business attraction team that is constantly, connecting with site selectors, reading different articles about companies and trying to match it to, what our targeted industries are. We receive calls from, again, the site selection consultants, especially when it's large electric users, because they want to be close to where our transmission system is. A state organization so JobsOhio can contact us. We get a lot of leads from our, especially BR&E leads from our own team, our customer account managers, our CSRs, our external affairs folks. They're out in the field. For right now, there's only one of me for 61 of the 88 counties, so I can't be everywhere at once. But we have just this great team, grassroots, boots on the ground team that's working to help unearth some of these BR&Es in particular, so expansions Next slide. To give you an idea of our internal coordination, it's pretty similar for FirstEnergy for the most part. Typically, we receive the JobsOhio lead when you guys get them, and then REDOs will make the request to us, or the LEDOs will make a request to us. And to the point before a couple slides ago is that JobsOhio might sometimes directly work with us just because this is an energy-intensive customer. We'll forward the request with the map to our engineers. The engineers analyze it and provide comments. We'll take the comments and ask follow-up questions, kind of sort through what our engineers are providing and try to, boil it down a little bit. And then we provide the responses to the LEDOs and the REDOs. And we strive to provide consistent information across our footprint, complete information. So we want to have the same information because, if an RFI comes out, we have, Ohio Southeast asking for information and Team NEO, and we have different people in Team NEO and different people in Ohio Southeast. And so we want to make sure that that same information is getting shared. And we reduce multiple requests to our distribution system planning team, which is huge because sometimes we've had in the past where someone's reached out to our community affairs up in Northwest Ohio and also reached out to Tim and I, and we had 2 requests going into the distribution engineer for the same project. Next slide. I'm going to walk through a couple of case studies to show the importance of working with us. This is Project T. This is an actual project that came out last year. And what this is going to show you is the importance of contacting us and the timing. So the statewide RFI was distributed and they required a response within 3 days. We had 1 response from the Ohio Southeast LEDO right away and 3 responses from a 1C, 1 Columbus LEDO. 40 days later, the prospect asked JobsOhio for additional information, the cost to serve and electric utility timeline, and they gave 6 days for a response. The community in Ohio Southeast asked us for that additional information right away. We found out that a LEDO and RGP submitted without checking with us, and another LEDO had texted Tim, and he didn't let me know that he was submitting for it. So we gathered the information for Ohio Southeast, and then we had to do all of this back work of, hey, do we actually have the capacity to serve that site? What upgrades are going to be needed? That takes, again, 1 to 2 weeks. And we actually ended up not meeting the prospect's deadline for a response within 6 days in RGP. The 1 Columbus LEDO sent the request 48 hours before it was due, and they had that information in their inbox 4 days prior. And so we weren't able to meet their timeline either. Next slide. So with consistency, this is another project. It was an RGP and 1C project lead. The new county LEDO RGP sent the RFI to AEP Ohio local customer service representative. Another county LEDO sent the RFI to our community and customer experience account manager. That's like our external affairs folks. And then 2 LEDOs sent it to Tim and I. And the information was consistent, which was given back to in our response back to JobsOhio. So the AEP Ohio local CSR and community and customer experience account manager were unable to provide market information. So Ohio is a deregulated state, and businesses and residents in investor-owned utilities have the ability to shop their generation component of the bill. AEP Ohio is legally not able to provide that information. And I am, and Tim was, well, Tim too, because we work for our Service Corps organization and not for AEP Ohio. So the information we presented was a lot different than what the folks up in Northwest Ohio, the CSR and the customer account manager were able to provide. For consistency, this is another project. It was an RGP, oh, I'm sorry, next slide, capacity. This is a really, really great example that shows that our system is fluid, it's dynamic, that it's constantly changing. This is Fredericktown Industrial Park, which is in Knox County, which is part of the One Columbus region. In November 2016, they were, this is actually supposed to be flipped, the bottom text. So where it says March 2020, that was actually the original text that was in the Site Ohio letter when it got authenticated. And at that time, it had, oh no, flip it. No, it is right. Okay, yeah. So the November 2016, it had 14.5 megawatts of excess capacity at that site. And that was as of 11/17/2016. In March 2020, they only had 4.5 megawatts. So over a period of 4 years, there's been so much activity there that 10 megawatts was taken off the system, and they only have 4.5 megawatts of excess capacity at that site. And so things change, and while that was 4 years, things change constantly. So next slide. This is a great example of tracking is our Mink Station, and this is in Licking County, which is just east of Franklin County. Etna Township is going gangbusters with activity. I mean, there's so much there, especially when it comes to distribution centers. There's just a ton of activity there. And what we recognized is that our infrastructure couldn't keep up with the buildings that were going up and the customers that were coming in. Next slide, please. This shows all of the projects that were submitted like at sites around that were in the Etna and Pataskala area. Next slide. So we worked with the city of Pataskala to understand what their vision was for the area. We recognized that we couldn't serve the projected growth that was going to be in that area. So our distribution team, we ended up providing them with information that helped enable the justification to build a new substation. We used all of that project information to see, how many times were sites in that area submitted for that. Again, we took the information from the community as to, what was their vision for that area. Next slide. So here's a couple of reminders. Anything that's economic development related needs to be sent to economic and business development, or economic development in the case of First Energy. Notify us, email us every time, please. And as soon as possible. That was the biggest thing that Pat Kelly wanted me to drive home today, is give us time, especially when it's an energy intensive customer. We need a lot of time. Reach out to us each and every time you submit for a project, even if you just submitted for a different project or it's a Site Ohio, authenticated site. Make sure you're sending it to us each and every time, especially if there's no electric information. Again, we can use that to justify infrastructure upgrades as shown in that Mink Station example. Even if you don't know for sure if you're submitting a site or sites, it is better to send it to us sooner so that we can begin the evaluation process. And of course, we need a minimum of 48 hours, and we absolutely would love to have as much time as possible, especially around the holidays. It got pretty hectic this year around December. A lot of people are out, and so the more time we can have, the better. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Liberty. I think it's clear that communication and early involvement with our utility partners is a key to success. So now we'd like to welcome Tommy Young who is the Economic Development Manager at Columbia Gas. Tommy has been with Columbia Gas for over 8 years and has held various roles across the company. As the Economic Development Manager, he partners with economic development organizations throughout the state and assists in their natural gas needs to help bring business to Ohio. The floor is yours, Tommy.
Thanks, Bethany, and thanks to Node and Team NEO for letting us speak today a little bit about the utilities and the role that we play in ED. Now, I might not be local like Liberty, but I am a big Cavs fan. I even stayed up late last night hoping to watch them beat the Lakers, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So not a local, but a big fan of the Northeast region. Next slide. Just a quick background about Columbia Gas and who we are. NiSource is the parent company of Columbia Gas and 5 other Columbia states, I'll call them. You can see them there on the map. In total, we serve about 4 million natural gas customers. And again, that's across 6 different states. Specific to us here in Ohio, the map that you see here, the green shaded area, that is our service territory for the most part. And you can see it's divided up there by all of the network partners that are under JobsOhio. So you can see where Team NEO sits and the different counties that we serve. We have about almost 20,000 miles worth of pipe underground, almost 1.5 million customers, and we are the largest gas distribution company in the state. So this is kind of a natural gas 101 slide that really just want to emphasize the fact that there's a lot of different parties and companies that are involved in delivering natural gas to a customer or to your potential customer. And if you click the button, I think 3 times, I got fancy and tried to put some animation on here. And there you go. So that dark blue line where you see the star starting up at the top left, that's basically natural gas coming out of the earth. Those are kind of where the producing wells are. And it goes through the dark blue line, which are transmission lines. Okay, you probably heard that term quite a bit with AEP and Liberty. What's important to realize is that that dark blue line is transmission and the green line would be like Columbia Gas, the distribution company. Transmission companies are responsible for just transporting gas all across the country. I think of them as our major freeways, almost like 71. They can move gas through state lines and they're regulated at the federal level. Once the gas travels through those dark blue lines and gets to us, the green lines, that's when it becomes our responsibility and it's our gas and we are responsible for getting it to the end customer. Distribution companies like Columbia were regulated at the state level with the PUCO, so 2 totally different regulations. We rely heavily on the transmission company, obviously, because that's where we have to get our gas from for our customers. That first, or I guess that top red circle that you see there, it says City Gate, something also called a point of delivery. That's really just where the ownership goes from a transmission company to a gas distribution company like Columbia. And I'll show you an example of that here on the next slide. And then lastly, that bottom red circle, that is just an example of a meter or a regulator. And every single customer, whether you're a single family home or you're a major manufacturing process, we all have either a meter or a regulator attached to our home or to our business. So this is an example of a point of delivery. And what I really want to emphasize here is that a lot of times we think that, well, if there's pipe running down the street in front of my building or in front of my site, then gas has to be there, right? There's going to have to be gas available if I can see the Columbia marker, or if I know there's a 4-inch pipe on Main Street, then natural gas has to be there. And that's not always the case. Point of delivery stations, like I said, is where the ownership transfers over to us, Columbia. And these are fairly big facilities. You can go to the next slide. This one particular is about 100 by, I think it was 125 feet. And you can just see all of the major pipe buildings that are inside these stations. A lot of times what will happen is you might need bigger pipe in front of your site, but you also might need some sort of upgrade at the point of delivery station. I'm not going to try to pretend that I know what all that is because I really have no clue, way beyond my knowledge base. But just to give you an idea of kind of what goes on behind the scenes, it's not always just about the pipe that's in front of the ground or that's in front of your site. Kind of goes all the way back to these point of delivery stations. This is just an example of what our pipe could look like when we're putting in, say, a mainline extension or swapping out small pipe for bigger pipe. And I mentioned the meter and regulator stations. So these all vary in size, but again, every customer is going to have one. That top left picture, that's an example of a meter and regulator station that's tied to a fairly good sized office building. You can see again, it's attached to the building and it's not too big. The top right, a little bit different, obviously bigger. That is an example of a meter or regulator station that would serve maybe a couple of apartment buildings. You can see that it's enclosed by a fence. So again, depending on how big the meter or regulator station is, we might have to enclose that station just for safety purposes and security purposes. That bottom picture, that is an example actually of the meter and regulator station that feeds the boiler system for OSU. This is a fairly large and, as you can imagine, expensive station. This is in an enclosed building. You can see the cement walls around there. So definitely want to keep something like that protected. The RFI process, most of what you'll see next is very similar to what Liberty went over within her presentation. A lot of the concepts for utilities when it comes to our role in the process is very similar. Obviously, gas is different than electric, but the major concepts for the most part are the same. So I'll just kind of walk you through some of the similarities and then differences between gas and electric when it comes to the process. But let's go back one more slide. But just like Liberty, we also receive the JobsOhio RFIs when they're sent out. And this is kind of an example of just how one of those would actually go through our process. We get requests, obviously, from just Team Neo, from just some of you who are local, from developers, property owners, and so forth. But this is an example of how one of the typical JobsOhio RFIs would come out. Goes through Team Neo, goes through the LEDOs, and then it would come to the Columbia Gas Economic Development Desk. And from there, we make sure that we have all of the correct information, which I'll get into. But once we know kind of the capacity and how much gas that potential customer is going to use, we then have to pass it on to what's called our systems planning group. Systems planning, they are a lot of really smart engineers who have to plug in the amount of gas that potential customer needs and has to see, okay, can our system handle that much gas? If not, what needs to be done? Do we need to extend a main line? Do we need to upgrade a POD? Do we need to swap small pipe out for bigger pipe? Do we need to change a regulator station? That's what that system planning group does. They then pass it on to field engineering, and then our field engineering team obviously are the ones that are going out into the field and evaluating sites for meter location and things like that. But what's key with field engineering is they really provide us with the cost estimate. They are really smart when it comes to knowing how much high pressure pipe versus medium pressure pipe cost, 4-inch versus 6-inch pipe. They really know the details of how to install the upgrades that system planning tells us. It would then come back to the economic development desk, and then we obviously pass it back up the ladder. And what you can see is really similar to AEP. The sooner you can get us the information, the better. Now, once that JobsOhio RFI request comes out, there's not much we can do with it until we know what sites Team Neo wants to submit or what sites your team wants to submit. So the quicker that you can engage us, let us know, say, hey, Tommy, we're thinking about submitting Airport West as an example for the site. Just a heads up, I'm going to try to have it in front of you as soon as I can. So just letting us know as soon as you can what sites you are thinking about submitting is really key. And Renee, I think you have to hit this one a few times too. I'll just have you hit it all at once. A few more times, I think. One more, there we go. All right, so the reason that Liberty touched on the fact that it takes about 2 to 3 days for our teams to go through these requests. And with Columbia and natural gas, these are the factors, kind of the 5 main points that our engineering teams look at to determine if we can actually provide the service needed, by the potential customer. And, this is kind of the detail behind why we need those 2 or 3 business days, because the better information that we have from you guys or the customer, the better our estimates are going to be. So whenever we get a request, the first thing that they're going to look at is a point of delivery. So does that point of delivery station that we saw pictures of, does that need any type of upgrade, or do we need to build a brand new one depending on how much gas they use? Betterment. Betterment is the same thing as basically upgrades. Is there a 2-inch pipe that needs to be upgraded to 4-inch pipe to serve this customer? Meter and a regulator station. I mentioned every customer is going to have some type of meter and regulator tied to their building. Do we need to extend our main lines? So are we a mile away from the site, for example? Do we need to extend a mile up and down Main Street just to get gas to the site? And then I touched on transmission line upgrades. Whenever we have a project in front of us, that's our unknown, because transmission companies are totally separate from distribution companies like Columbia. So a lot of times transmission line upgrades are unknown for us. So when we need to get back with you guys in say 24 or 48 hours, we're just not going to know the transmission line information. It would just take way too long for us to get information back from the transmission company. What we've seen lately is that takes weeks to months just to get simple communication with them. So a lot of times we don't know what transmission line upgrades will be needed, but we can always tell you what's needed on our system. You can see some of the pricing for this. And what drives a lot of the pricing, these are just ballpark cost estimates of what we've seen lately. But what drives the cost to your potential customer relies on how much gas they're going to need. That's why it's really important that one of the key information pieces that we get is how much gas does your customer need? And I'll get into that here in a minute, but you can just kind of see the ballpark pricing for some of this stuff. Again, we would hate to tell you that, you would need a mainline extension of a medium pressure pipe that might cost $100. But in reality, until we know how much gas they're going to need, maybe that customer needs high pressure pipe and it's more $500 per foot. So a lot of the pricing is just geared towards how much gas they're going to use. So once we kind of know what that price is and how much the total project would cost, whether it's a mainline extension, whether it's a new POD, whatever it is, that's when we can kind of run that through our economic model. And what we do at Columbia is, so we take that total project cost and we take the revenue that would be generated from that potential customer spread out over a certain amount of years. And then that's going to spit out a deposit that would be required from a customer, potentially. Sometimes there's not a deposit, sometimes there is. Again, just depends on how much gas they're going to use. A monthly bill, this is a really common question we get when it comes to cost. I've seen lately a lot of clients are asking for examples of a monthly bill. Again, it's driven by usage, because what that does is that would tell us what customer class your potential customer would fall under. What you see here is just two examples of a large general service customer and then a general service customer. You can see the different rates in blue and how it varies depending on how much gas they use. This is just two examples of, I think we have, last time I checked, I want to say we have maybe 19 different customer classes and different requirements to meet each customer class, and it gets really confusing. But again, just want to emphasize that even to give an example of how much a monthly bill would cost, again, is really driven by usage. So a quick case study. This was a project that came out a couple of years ago called Project Cocktail. They were a manufacturer of high-end glass products, and they used natural gas in a process. So it wasn't just to heat a building, it was to do something with the glass, I think melt the glass maybe. We knew that they wanted 75 MCF per hour, so that's how much gas they used. I won't worry about what all that means, but just know that they needed 75 MCF per hour, and we didn't know how much pressure. So that 75 MCF per hour tells us the volume of gas, how much gas they actually need. But then what the pressure does, which we didn't have in this case, but what pressure tells us is how fast do they need that pressure, or how fast do they need that gas to actually come out into their system. So for example, with a gas stove, you don't need that gas coming out very fast, so you probably wouldn't need much pressure. Versus if you take Honda, for example, Honda manufacturing, when they're using natural gas to dry all the paint on their cars and they're sending it through what looks like a car wash, they need a lot of gas coming out really fast to dry all that paint. So that's what pressure tells us, is how fast do you want that gas to move through the pipe. But the map that you see on your right, all the different colored lines, that's our pipe, okay? So this is an example of our GIS system. On the bottom there, kind of in the middle, the black square, that was the site that was being submitted. And I think, Renee, if you click once, we'll see that black star come up on the top. So that dark blue line, again, that's our transmission line. So in order for gas to get down to that site on the bottom, it starts all the way up there at the top where gas is taken from the transmission line and fed into our system, right where that star is. And the gas has to travel all the way through those lines one way or another to get down to that site. And if you want to start clicking, Renee. So our engineers went through those 5 factors that we talked about to determine what upgrades potentially would be needed for this customer. Turns out that there's no POD work. So that big facility that we saw, there's nothing that needs to be done there. When it got down a little bit closer to the site, there was some small pipe that needed to be switched out. It was 7,000 feet worth. So we would have to go in and take out whatever size pipe is there and lay bigger pipe. And then we were also just short of the site. So depending on meter location and where the customer would actually place their meter, it'd be, roughly a 4,200 foot extension. And then I think 2 more clicks. And then we know another meter and reg station is needed, which is needed for every project. So getting to the cost, to do all of that work, estimated about $3 million worth. Based on this customer's usage of 75 MCF an hour, our team plugs that into our model, and it spits out a deposit that Cocktail would have to pay of $2 million. So based on the regulations from the PUCO, Columbia is able to pick up $1 million of that $3 million cost. And then so the cost to Cocktail to come online would be $2 million. Some important questions that you should ask the client that are gonna help us in the end and is gonna make the process go much smoother and faster. We always need to know, how does the customer plan on using natural gas? Is it literally just to heat a spec building? Or again, do they want to use it in a big manufacturing process? How much gas do they need? I think I probably hit on this more than I needed to, but we need to know volume or load or capacity for us to really determine anything. It comes in a lot of different measurements, MCF per hour, cubic feet, We see BTUs a lot too, decatherms. But something that you can get us in terms of usage is really helpful, and we can convert it however we need to see it, but just getting some type of usage. How often are they going to use gas? Once we have that MCF per hour number, we can then break it down and say, well, do they need that 8 hours a day at 5 days a week? Do they run their manufacturing process 24/7, 365? And then pressure. Usually that comes in PSI, which is pounds per square inch. A lot of the international measurements are in bar too, but again, pressure is just as important as how much gas they're going to need, because that tells us how quickly we need to push it through our system. Key takeaways, these are going to be similar to what Liberty went over, but just to hit on them again, the earlier the better. You know, we need 2 to 3 business days to turn around a project at a minimum. Our system is just as dynamic as AEP's. It's always changing. So if you submit a site 1 month and you want to submit that site again the next month, please come back to us so we can see if our systems change. And just like Liberty said, every single customer is different. They could maybe use the same amount of gas, but the pressure could be totally different, which could cause different upgrades. Lastly, this is just an example of kind of some ballpark figures to give you a better idea if you see some of these gas measurements coming through, how much gas customers actually use. There's a lot of times where we'll see these RFIs and they'll say there's some big paper manufacturer and they use 2 MCF an hour. Well, we know that can't be right. There has to be something wrong with that, because we know typically a paper manufacturer is more closer to 200 MCF an hour. So that's kind of where the back and forth would then go with the customer. But just to give you a kind of a ballpark idea of how much gas some of these potential customers could use, just to help you with early communication. And I think that's it.
All right. Thank you so much, Tommy. This was really good information, I think, on both presentations. I know I learned a lot. One of the questions that I have, Renee, I know you'll be working on the Q&A, but maybe just to kick that off, one of the questions that I had as an economic developer is, you know, when we're working with projects and we try to ask the questions that both you and Liberty said, you know, you need to know in order to get that information. Sometimes we just don't get that from the client and we don't know. Do you, and I guess Liberty, this is for you as well, are you both able to present sort of hypothetical scenarios where you might say, you know, if they had this peak demand or if they had this much pressure demand, this is what we would be able to do? Is that helpful to you or helpful in helping us to respond to project needs or requests about different sites?
Yeah, I know that we harp on you guys a lot about getting all this information to us like it's a piece of cake, and your potential customers just have it all in their back pocket. So we know that it's really hard for you guys to get information from the customers like this. One thing, one question that could be asked to the customers is, do they have an example of another facility that they currently have that's currently up and running, where they could get a sample bill from, or they could go and look at that facility to see how much electricity are they using now. It might not be the exact same, and we understand that, but that would at least get us in the ballpark. Okay, here's a current facility that they have now. They're going to build it about the same. So we can at least use something based off of their current facility that would help us within our model.
And I totally agree with that. Another thing is, when it's partial information. So in the example I gave of, like, there was an RFI that came out a couple months ago with 12,000 amps, or I'm sorry, 1,200 amps. I can make an assumption at what the voltage is, plug it into a calculation, and kind of get a rough idea of maybe what that load could be like. We can also talk to our customer account managers and folks that are on our team to ask them, hey, we have this manufacturer, let's say it's for the automotive industry and they do stamping. Do we have any customers like that? What does their load look like? But we definitely need a lot of time, a lot more time than maybe a 48 hours, which, you know, you can't control that, but we can definitely try to find workarounds to try to get it at least a ballpark.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll say on this is the reason that we want to get as close as we can to a precise estimate is because we don't want to put you guys in a bad spot. We don't want to go to you and say, hey, it's only going to cost $100,000. I don't want to say only, it's going to cost $100,000 to bring your potential customer online, you know, based on the information given. And then all of a sudden they come back a month later and usage change, and now it's $1 million to bring them online. We don't want you to give the potential customer false information. So that's why we harp on getting that info up front as best as we can to help you guys out.
Thank you. All right, we've got a couple of questions coming in on the Q&A. This one is directed to Liberty from Patrick O'Malley. Do the electric utility folks offer economic development riders or incentives?
Thank you, Patrick. It's good to hear from you, and I hope you and your family are doing well. So unfortunately, we really don't have any economic development riders or incentive programs. We have a rate case that's before the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, and so we have proposed something in there that might allow us to do that. I mean, it's all dependent on what they rule. We are a deregulated state, and so those businesses and residential customers that are in investor-owned utilities, so that would be Duke, First Energy, AEP, and I think DP&L, and they have the ability to shop that generation component of their bill, which can provide substantial savings, you know, for the resident or the business customers. So instead of you know, incentives, we do have that ability to shop the generation component of the bill. Thanks for the question.
The next question is from Kathy Brighton Butcher, a familiar name to me in Medina County. So I guess maybe, Tommy, we'll kick it over to you first and then see if Liberty has anything else to add. The question is, are there any resources to help fund infrastructure upgrades or builds? I've heard that PUCO may have some funds, wondering about that and what other programs might help.
Sure. From the Columbia side and the gas distribution side, we do have incentives available for economic development projects. One in particular called LEAD. It's called 5 different things, but I'll just go with LEAD for now. And it's not necessarily a bucket of funds that we have set aside. It's actually quite the opposite. But if you think back to the example that I had for that project cocktail, where $3,000 project cost, Columbia can pick up $1 million of that, so the customer would owe $2 million. LEAD has the potential to come in and help offset a portion of that $2 million cost to the customer. There's a lot of different requirements that the potential customer would have to meet to get those funds. And the project does have to go through PUCO approval. But it is a nice mechanism that we have available. So on top of any initial offsetting to costs that we do have this economic development program that could potentially offset some other cost. As far as anything at the PUCO, nothing that I'm aware of. There's really no bucket of funds that the PUCO sets aside. We do have energy efficiency programs, and we have a great energy efficiency team that runs all of that. Not so many programs geared towards really large customers just because their rate is already so much lower. But if you're in that kind of small to medium size user, then we can definitely work with our energy efficiency team to see if they have any programs.
Thank you, Tommy. I think, you know, that just emphasizes for me the importance of working with you as closely as possible, as early as possible. The next question, I guess, is along those lines, Tommy, and so maybe Liberty, I don't know if you wanted to touch on this as well. Brad Earhart in Portage County asks, are there any incentives for energy efficiency? So Liberty?
Yeah, so I don't know if First Energy has any programs I can tell you that AEP had energy efficiency programs, and those programs expired September 30th of last year. So we no longer have energy efficiency programs. I would certainly recommend reaching out to First Energy. I believe Renee is your contact, and asking them if they have that.
All right, and there's a question in the chat box, and I guess this touches on what we had discussed a little bit earlier, but if you have any additional insight. Barrett Thomas over in Richland says, it seems like leads that come through JobsOhio are sometimes lacking the detail that, our utilities are requesting. What do we do when we can't answer your questions? So any additional advice for us?
Yeah, I'll say when I see those requests come in, a lot of times, Barrett, you're right, they don't have the information that we need. What's really nice about Ohio and the way that we operate economic development is myself, Columbia, Liberty, her entire team, we have really close relationships with everyone over at JobsOhio. And we've probably been through this presentation with them 100 different times. So they understand the importance of getting that information from the potential customer. And they also know that we can't provide the right information without it. A lot of times what I'll try to do, and I'm sure Liberty does the same, is if there is information provided, or even if there isn't, we'll try to work behind the scenes with JobsOhio to get a lot of that information. So there was one just recently that came out with gas information that the measurement of gas was really off for what that customer was doing. So we worked behind the scenes to let JobsOhio know, hey, you need to go back to the customer because this information doesn't seem right. I mean, they were barely using any gas for a large manufacturer. And then they would do that. And so in terms of questions you can ask, I mean, you can point them in our direction if you want, and we can try to work with them as best as we can, and just let them know that, hey, Barrett can't submit any gas information because we don't know how much gas they're going to use. But Liberty, nothing comes off the top of my mind that they can ask in particular, besides having them contact us.
I think one thing maybe for the electric side, we can potentially share when it comes to like distribution what the excess capacity is at the site. So, and that's, I think, a little different from the gas company. And so we might be able to say, hey, we have about 2 megawatts of excess capacity at this location. And that can be included in the RFI. But I think, really and truly what Tommy said is on point. So.
Well, thank you both so much. There's a couple of comments in the Q&A if you want to take a look at that. I don't see any more questions. So Renee, I will turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Bethany. Thank you, Liberty. Thank you, Tommy. Exceptional information, extremely useful for the folks that are here that are on the line. We have 3 minutes